Hey guys, tonight we're slipping behind the convent walls, where silence is sacred, but secrets stir just beneath the surface. Picture this, a foggy morning in the countryside, the scent of cold dew clinging to stone, a bell tolls, sharp and ancient, and you're only 12 years old still aching from growing pains, still dreaming about things you don't understand when your parents shove a rolled-up parchment into your hands, kiss your forehead once, and send you through iron-barred gates that will likely never open again. Congratulations, you're now a bride of Christ, whether you wanted to be or not. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're watching. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're inside now, and it smells like old wax and damp linen. The nuns in charge greet you with eyes that are either too cold or too kind, neither feels comforting. They hand you a coarse habit, shave your hair to the scalp, to rid you of vanity, and instruct you in the rule of Saint Benedict. No meat, no excessive talking, no touching, no pleasures of the flesh. Ever. You mouth the words, barely understanding them, while another girl your age quietly sobs during the ceremony. You're officially in, but you're also sealed away. In theory, this cloistered life is meant to protect your soul, but in practice, it's more like being locked in a very spiritual boarding school minus the recess and with far more incense. There's prayer at dawn, chores until midday, and silence during meals while someone reads Latin aloud from a podium. You're still learning to translate it in your head. But let's be honest, some of it is just biblical guilt on loop. Your new name is Sister Magdalene, not because you chose it, but because the Mother Superior said it suited your sinful spirit. Funny, considering you've never even held a boy's hand. Still, the implication sticks. You're here to repent before you even sin. This wasn't uncommon in medieval Europe. Familiar, especially noble ones, often dropped off surplus daughters at the nearest convent. Dowries were expensive, nunneries were cheaper. For the church, it was a win-win. A fresh soul for God, and another pair of hands to scrub floors or illuminate manuscripts. For the girls, not so much. Some were barely weaned. Others were oblate, dedicated to the monastery before they even had teeth. Consent wasn't really a thing. Just ask the toddler wearing a tiny wimple and dragging a bucket bigger than her. Still, you adapt. Sort of. You make a few quiet friends, Anna, who hides crusts of bread in her sleeves, and Lucia, who whispers Latin jokes that shouldn't be funny but are. The three of you develop a system of subtle gestures, a squeeze of the arm for comfort, a nudge with the knee for attention. It's not much, but it's something. One afternoon during sewing hour, you hear muffled giggles from behind a curtain near the chapel. You sneak closer, just a glance. Nothing scandalous yet, but it's enough to see two older sisters pressed close, lips brushing quickly before one flinches away and mutters a prayer. You freeze. They see you, and they smile. Not like they're caught, but like they're inviting you in on a secret. The moment passes, but something shifts. You don't quite feel as alone after that. Historians still argue whether medieval convents were truly strict, or if many quietly tolerated minor infractions, so long as things didn't become public scandals. It's tricky. Some convents truly were ascetic, guarded like fortresses. Others, especially ones with wealth or noble connections, became soft places to hide from an unwanted world. You could find libraries full of forbidden poetry, kitchens that smuggled in honeyed wine, and sisters who embroidered secular love stories into their altar cloths if you knew where to look. You start to notice things. A slip of silk beneath someone's sleeve. A faint scent of lavender impossible to source on convent grounds wafting from a sister's cell. Whispers in the dark about the boy who delivers fish, and how he lingers too long at the west gate. You don't ask too many questions, but you do listen, and as the days slide into seasons, the rules of the convent feel less like commandments, and more like suggestions negotiated daily with glances and nods. One night, a new girl arrives. She's from a wealthy family and refuses to take her vows quietly. She speaks of suitors she had to abandon, of banquets, and once, shockingly, of a kiss stolen in a churchyard. Some sisters shush her. Others listen too intently. You can tell she's going to stir things up, and you're not entirely sure that's a bad thing. Meanwhile, You start dreaming of open windows, of running through the orchard barefoot, of hands gentle and forbidden brushing your collarbone. You wake, flushed and panicked. Confession becomes a regular necessity. But your confessor, an old priest with cloudy eyes, seems less interested in your sins than in the soft lilt of your voice. You keep your head bowed. You say nothing. But you wonder how many others have sat where you sit now, telling truths no one really wants to fix. By now, you understand the rhythm of the place. The quiet isn't holy. It's layered with secrets. The candlelight isn't soft. It hides shadows. And the silence isn't peace. It's pressure-coiled like a spring. And though you try to be good, really try, you're starting to realize that goodness here doesn't always look like purity. Sometimes it looks like survival. You wake up before the sun again. Your eyelids ache, and the cold stone floor bites your bare feet as you step out of bed for lauds. The chapel smells like damp wood and tired breath. Candles flicker while the older nuns chant through psalms with their eyes half closed. You murmur along, still groggy, the Latin words droning like waves. You've said the same prayers so many times now that you can recite them in your sleep, and sometimes you swear you do. You'd think rules would be simpler inside the cloister, but that's the funny part. The tighter the rules, the more complicated life becomes. There's the rule, of course, Saint Benedict's code of conduct, the sacred backbone of monastic life. But then there are the dozens of unwritten rules. Which sister you can trust, who not to sit beside in the refectory, what tone of voice you use when addressing the prioress. What happens when you break one of these? And worse, what happens when you don't, but someone says you did anyway? Cloistered life is meant to protect you from the world's temptations. No visitors, no letters, no gossip, no physical contact. But temptation has a way of slipping through even the most sacred cracks. Sometimes it enters through a back door in the form of a new delivery boy with unruly curls. Sometimes it arrives inside your own head, after months of fasting and loneliness, and wondering what it even means to be pure. Saint Benedict wrote, "Idleness is the enemy of the soul." That's why you're always busy. When you're not praying, you're stitching altar cloths or tending vegetables or scraping candle wax off pews. But none of this stops your mind from wandering, or your eyes from catching on small, forbidden details. The way Sister Beatrice's voice dips when she sings, the way Sister Claire's lashes flutter when she laughs. You notice these things and then scold yourself. But the noticing never stops. One of the more peculiar convent chores is watching over the parlour, a small stone room where, once a week, select sisters are allowed to receive guests. There's a thick iron grate between visitor and nun, and you're expected to maintain custody of the eyes, meaning you don't look too closely, don't smile too much, don't let your eyes linger on anything that might stir the senses. Today, you're stationed there. You sit stiffly as an elderly merchant talks through the bars with his daughter, who left behind a wealthy suitor to join this convent. She doesn't cry. She doesn't smile either. Just listens, nods, and looks away from him with a numbness you recognize. But then there's another guest young, golden-haired, a cousin to someone inside. His voice is too cheerful, too curious. He jokes with the sister behind the grate, asks her if she's still eating all the plums from the orchard. She blushes. You feel the tension. It's like watching a match held too close to a frayed thread. You say nothing. The grate holds. But you start to understand why these conversations sometimes turn dangerous. Historians still argue whether these guest parlours were genuinely protective or simply performative a way to maintain the illusion of chastity while enabling relationships to bloom behind symbolic barriers. Some convents installed a second screen behind the first. Others, like yours, never bothered. Later that week, you're working in the herb garden, trying to avoid nettles, when Sister Marjorie, whose fingers always smell faintly of mint, pulls you aside. She talks in code, asking if you'd like to learn how to steep violets into a skin tonic. But there's an edge to her offer, an unspoken invitation beneath the words. You accept, unsure why. That night, in her small workroom behind the apothecary shelves, she lights a candle and begins to teach you, really teach you, about herbs, yes, but also about the power of touch, the danger of longing, the quiet rebellion of tending to your own beauty in a place that tells you to erase it. She brushes a drop of oil across your wrist, explaining its use in soothing disturbances of the heart. You both laugh softly, too softly. Nothing happens, and yet something does. You leave with a pouch of dried rosemary, and the sense that you've stepped closer to a line you hadn't even known was there. Still, you're not the only one struggling with vows. You begin to hear whispers at night through the walls, under doors, not just about visitors or missing candles, but about the kinds of things no one writes down. Sister Isabella was caught kissing a lay sister near the old laundry pit. The prioress said nothing, but suddenly, Isabella was scrubbing chamber pots for weeks. Another nun, Sister Agnes, vanishes entirely, with only vague murmurs of a transfer to a stricter order across the mountains. No one says why. The truth is, chastity isn't just about what you do, it's about what others think you might do. It's a performancer, delicate pantomime, where your virtue is always under review, and your body is never quite your own. You learn to monitor your movements, watch how you hold your hands, you learn to keep your eyes down, even when someone else's eyes are definitely not. And yet, the system has holes. Huge, obvious ones. For instance, why do some sisters get weekly visits from well-dressed relatives and return to the dormitories with pastries and French soaps? Why does the cellar inventory always show less wine than was delivered? Why does the chapel sometimes smell like cologne on Sunday mornings? You've begun to suspect that the people who preach the most about purity are often the ones who know the most about its boundaries. And those who seem the most holy? Well, let's just say Sister Joan's ability to recite entire psalms by heart didn't stop her from stealing your carved comb. But you've changed too. You used to blush at the word sin. Now, you just raise an eyebrow and wait for the details. You're learning that virtue, like anything else, is often a matter of who's watching. You're scrubbing your hands at the stone basin behind the refectory when Sister Lucia, your partner in mischief since day one, leans in close and whispers, "Meet me in the garden after none." You nod without asking why. That's how things work now. The rules are written in Latin, but the real commandments those live in glances, in timing, in secrets traded like crumbs beneath the table. After prayers, you duck out behind the cloister arches and slip through the wooden gate into the convent's garden. It's walled off, just like everything else, but in a different way. There are bursts of foxglove and clusters of marigolds, old pear trees groaning with fruit, and winding paths framed with lavender. And somehow, it feels a little more alive than the rest of the convent. This is where things bloom, even things that aren't supposed to. Lucia's already waiting beneath the arbor, one leg tucked beneath her. She's picking at the petals of a daisy with exaggerated care. "You ever think about what you'd be doing if you weren't here?" she asks. You do, often, but instead, you just shrug. The silence stretches out, not awkward, just familiar. That's when you notice the tiny bundle of parchment in her lap. She hands it over like she's passing a prayer request. It's a letter, no seal, just a folded corner, worn from handling. The ink is faint, but legible. And what it says? Well, it doesn't quote scripture. You read phrases like "your hands in my hair," and "the way you smiled when I sang in the vestry." It's not addressed to anyone, not signed either. But the tone is unmistakable. Intimate, yearning, carnal. You look up at Lucia, stunned. "Who?" you begin. She cuts you off with a slow shake of her head, and a grin that's half daring, half plea. The letter isn't hers. Not exactly. She says she found it tucked beneath Sister Agnes's mattress, the night before Agnes disappeared. You know, the one who transferred. Suddenly, the rumours have more weight, and something inside you shifts. Because that letter isn't just a relic of someone else's scandal. It's a possibility. Historians still argue whether romantic relationships between nuns were rare anomalies or quiet features of cloistered life. Some argue these were expressions of spiritual devotion, misunderstood by modern standards. Others point to court records, yes. Actual trials where convents were accused of harbouring unnatural affections and even secret marriages. The line between spiritual ecstasy and physical desire was thin and often deliberately blurred. A few weeks later, you're back in the garden again, helping Sister Marjorie with the chamomile. The air smells sweet, and she hums while she works. You don't know the song, but it's soothing. She pauses, wiping sweat from her brow, and suddenly asks, "Do you think you'll ever love anyone?" The question is too pointed to be innocent. You pretend not to hear, but she doesn't press. She just hands you a small flower, its petals perfect and white, and says, "Then keep this, just in case." The garden becomes a meeting place, not for trysts, Not yet, but for moments where things go unspoken and still feel louder than chants in the chapel. It's where Sister Beatrice reads verses from Song of Songs a little too slowly, and where you catch Sister Clare tracing the words into the soil with her finger like she's casting a spell. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. That's scripture. That's allowed. But it doesn't feel holy the way she says it. It feels like a dare. One day, you overhear two of the older nuns speaking in hushed tones near the herb shed. One says something about the incident in the garden last Lent. The other responds, "It was just holding hands," but the way they say it just makes it sound like everything. You duck away before they spot you, heart pounding, as if you've done something wrong just by listening. There's a rhythm to these garden moments now, a new kind of liturgy, glances across rows of parsley, brushed fingertips when passing the watering bucket, smiles too warm to be casual. You realize that even in a place designed to suffocate passion, it finds a way to grow like ivy through cracks in stone. One night, Lucia slips you a note beneath your pillow. It says, "Midnight, Orchard Gate." That's it, but it's enough. You lie awake for hours, heart hammering in your chest, imagining 1,000 different scenarios, and none of them entirely pure. When the bell finally tolls for matins, you sneak out barefoot, the stone cold beneath your toes. The orchard is dark, the moon barely a sliver, but she's there, so are you. And for a moment, the rules vanish. You don't kiss, not yet. You just sit under the oldest pear tree, shoulder to shoulder, sharing a single apple between you. But it feels like rebellion, like everything your vows were meant to crush. She leans her head against yours and whispers, "I think we're still good, just not the kind of good they want." You don't sleep that night. You don't even try. In the days that follow, you find yourself seeing the convent in a new light. It's still stone and scripture and rules, but now you see the cracks more clearly. You see where the light gets in, where people carve out spaces for themselves, even in silence. And suddenly, you understand something vital. Holiness, like love, is never as simple as they tell you. You think you've become good at reading silences, at decoding the soft glances passed over bowls of porridge, the clumsily erased footprints in the dust near the vestry door, the way Sister Clare suddenly hums when the young confessor visits. But nothing quite prepares you for how deeply tangled the Church's own agents are in these quiet breaches of purity. The priest assigned to your convent is new, Father Antonius, youngish, or at least younger than most. His voice is syrupy and low when he speaks from the pulpit, always emphasizing mercy more than fire and brimstone. The sisters swoon not visibly, of course. That would be indecent. But you see the straightening of backs when he enters, the exaggerated modesty, the sudden interest in theological questions that no one cared about last week. Even the Mother Superior's tone shifts, subtly, when she greets him. It doesn't take long before you begin to hear the whispers, that he walks the cloisters after compline, that he lingers too long during confession, that he visits Sister Marjorie's cell under the guise of theological tutoring. You're not naive anymore. You don't dismiss the rumours. You observe. It starts during your own confession. You kneel. You whisper your sin-impure thoughts, envy, a growing irritation with the rigid hierarchy of convent life. Father Antonius murmurs back soothing Latin absolutions, but he doesn't stop there. "Tell me more," he says. His voice is velvet, low and strange. "Don't hold anything back." You pause. Isn't that the whole point of confession? To unburden the soul completely? But something in his tone isn't priestly. It's probing, delighted, not scandalized. You test it. You say you dreamed of kissing someone. He doesn't rebuke. He says, "That's only human." Then he asks, "Was it a man?" You lie. You say yes. His smile is audible. You feel sick. Historians still argue whether some confessors use their position for psychological manipulation, or if these rare incidents were exaggerated by Protestant reformers looking to smear the Catholic Church. But documents survive letters, inquisitions, reports that suggest some priests, particularly those isolated in female convents, blurred the lines between confessor and seducer with astonishing frequency. Confession wasn't always a cage for sin. Sometimes it was an invitation. Weeks pass. You avoid confession now. You pray alone, or with Lucia, whose laughter, when it's just the two of you, has become your favorite sound. But others don't avoid him. You see Sister Juliana emerging from the chapel one evening, her face blotched with tears, her hands trembling. You ask nothing. She says nothing, but her silence screams. Soon after, things begin to change. The prioress suddenly becomes stricter. No more gardening alone. No more private study hours. The library is locked outside of communal reading. One sister, caught sneaking into the choir loft after dark, is publicly shamed. She kneels for hours during Mass as a warning. The message is clear. Someone has noticed. Someone's cleaning house. But the strange part? Father Antonius isn't reprimanded. He's elevated, praised in Sunday sermons, trusted more deeply. And that tells you something else about this world, that sin, when cloaked in priestly robes, often escapes unpunished. Still, not everyone stays quiet. Sister Teresa, the oldest nun in the convent, starts speaking up. She's bent like a crooked broomstick, but her voice is strong. One day at breakfast, she loudly asks why only the younger sisters are called to confession now. Another time, she whispers to you, "Don't trust the ones who smile too much during absolution." You start sitting beside her during meals. Her presence is a shield, for a while, at least. But even shields can be taken away. One morning, you wake to find her bed stripped, her few possessions gone. No explanation is given. You ask where she's been sent. The prioress only says, "She's found peace elsewhere." You know what that means, and you don't like it. Then comes the scandal. You don't see it happen, but you hear the aftermath like thunder. Sister Marjorie is caught in the chapel, of all places, with him. There's shouting. The bell tolls at the wrong hour. The Mother Superior's voice cracks for the first time in public. Marjorie is confined. Antonius disappears for 1 week, maybe 2. When he returns, he delivers a homily about temptation, calls himself a fallen shepherd, and weeps at the altar. And the worst part? They let him stay. From then on, you understand something cruel about power here. Nuns might sin, but priests struggle. Nuns must confess and be punished. Priests must weep and be forgiven. The hierarchy doesn't just keep the world outside at bay. It keeps you in your place, even when the rules are broken by those at the top. Lucia is furious. She writes furious letters, to no one in particular. She reads them aloud to you sometimes before burning them in the candle's flame. You do the same. Eventually, it helps. A little. The garden becomes even more precious now. It's the only place untouched by his shadow, but it too feels smaller, narrower. You can't unsee the hypocrisy that coils like ivy along the cloister walls, the way justice favors the powerful, the way purity is a costume some never have to wear. So you learn to survive, carefully, cleverly. You speak less, you watch more, you memorize the way doors sound when they creak open at night. You learn which sisters have the softest steps. You notice how Lucia begins pressing flowers into your prayer book, not random ones, but the language of flowers kind. Passion flowers, rue, red carnations. You never say what it means, but you both understand. You're mending the hem of your cloak in the workroom when Sister Honoria bursts through the door, panting and pale. She's gripping a scrap of parchment like it might catch fire. Without a word, she presses it into your hand and flees. You open it, just a few lines of shaky Latin, but the meaning is sharp. Sister Benedicta was found with child. She swore it was the Holy Ghost. The bishop does not agree. The room feels suddenly colder. You sit down hard on the wooden bench, thread dangling from your fingers. You'd known Sister Benedicta quiet, plump, always humming. She once patched a tear in your veil without being asked. And now? Now she's a scandal. The rumours spread like spilled ink. Some say she was seduced by a novice priest. Others claim she met a stable boy during a rare trip to the infirmary in town. The most dramatic version insists it was Immaculate Divine Intervention. But even among the devout, that story doesn't hold much water. The bishop certainly doesn't buy it. You try not to listen, but the details are impossible to ignore. Her stomach had begun to swell. She'd worn extra layers, kept to herself, even began fasting more than required. But a swollen belly has a way of making itself known, no matter how many prayers you say over it. One sister claimed she saw Benedicta weeping in the orchard, pressing her hands over her stomach and whispering apologies to the leaves. She's gone now, transferred, confined, possibly worse. No one says for sure. Her cell is empty. Her name is never spoken again. It's not the first time this has happened either. You start hearing older stories of babies born in secret, hidden in the laundry baskets, passed off to wet nurses and adopted by distant cousins. Of nuns who suddenly became mad, locked away for years, their only sin being a body that told the truth too loudly. Historians still argue whether these were isolated incidents or part of a pattern. Court records, particularly from Italy and France, describe nunneries where multiple pregnancies occurred within a single generation. In some cases, entire convents were accused of moral collapse. The church would arrive, hold a quiet inquiry, remove a few heads, then seal the doors and pretend nothing ever happened. But in truth, things were often far messier and far more human. Cloistered life didn't remove desire, it just caged it, starved it, and then acted surprised when it broke free. You find yourself thinking more and more about Sister Benedicta, not just her fate, but the mechanics of her life. Where had it happened? How long had it gone on? Who helped her? Who betrayed her? Did she think she could get away with it? Did she want to? That night, Lucia finds you in the corridor and says, "Come with me." No explanation. Just her hand grabbing yours and tugging you silently past the dormitories, down the back stairwell, through a wooden door you've never noticed before. It leads to the old cellar. It smells like damp stone and apples. There's a broken crucifix in the corner, and crates of onions lined against the wall. Lucia lights a candle and shows you what she's found. Behind a curtain of old sacks, a hollowed alcove in the brick. Inside it, a faded blanket, a cracked bowl, a doll made of twine. "You think this was hers?" you whisper. Lucia nods. "Or someone else's. Doesn't matter now." You sit in silence. The candle flickers, casting ghost shapes on the walls. You imagine Sister Benedicta, down here with her belly growing, singing lullabies to the dark. Or maybe someone else entirely. Maybe there were many someones. Hidden corners like this don't build themselves. Some nuns, it seems, behaved very badly indeed. You hear tales half serious, half hushed of convents that doubled as brothels, of abbesses who took lovers openly and used the treasury to bribe inquisitors. There's the infamous case of the convent of St. Clare in Naples, where the nuns were accused of keeping male visitors locked in the bell tower for days. Another tale, likely exaggerated but still delicious, involves a group of sisters in Ghent who painted erotic frescoes in the attic and held poetry readings by candlelight while sipping stolen sacramental wine. You ask Lucia if she thinks any of it is true. She shrugs. "Truth's not the point," she says. "It's the fact that it could be. End of. The possibility alone is enough to unsettle everything." One morning, while cleaning the chapel, you find a tiny carved heart beneath a pew. It's made of softwood, roughly whittled, initials scratched faintly into its surface. You turn it over in your palm, wondering who it belonged to, whether it was ever found, whether anyone missed it. You tuck it into your pocket. Later, when you're alone, you press it into the wall behind your cot, a small rebellion, a soft reminder that even in a place built to erase desire, some desires refuse to be forgotten. It begins with a thread, a loose, shimmering strand sticking out from the hem of Sister Clare's robe. You notice it during Vespers, when the setting sun slices through the stained glass and sets the whole chapel glowing. It isn't linen. It glints. Silk, you think. Definitely not regulation. After prayers, you trail behind her, pretending to be preoccupied with your rosary, but watching. She walks differently now, more gracefully, less hunched, and there's a scent, barely noticeable under the usual veil of incense. Rose, maybe, or amber. Something soft, sweet, and completely forbidden. You follow her into the dormitory and find your confirmation. On her bed, hastily tucked beneath a stack of folded veils, lies a convivary handled, inlaid with green glass. The sort of thing a merchant's wife might flaunt. Not something a nun should possess. Not unless it came from outside. You don't report her. Of course not. But now you start noticing the signs elsewhere. Sister Elena's veil, trimmed with lace that wasn't there last month. The shimmer of a gold ring on Sister Beatrice's finger, almost completely hidden by her sleeve. The soft swish of finer fabric beneath the standard issue woolen habit. You realize something else too. The richer the sister's background, the more likely she is to be bending the rules. Nobility does not vanish at the cloister. Gattet just changes its wardrobe. Historians still argue whether such small acts were tolerated or quietly encouraged. Some abbesses were known to allow noble-born sisters to keep certain luxuries in exchange for hefty endowments from their families. Others turned a blind eye until Rome took notice. But the evidence remains: letters, inventories, even surviving garments with embroidery too intricate to be accidental. One afternoon, during embroidery duty, you find a small chest tucked behind a loose panel in the floor. Inside are spools of golden thread, scraps of velvet, and a half-finished piece of needlework swirling vines wrapped around the word amica, friend, or something more. You begin to piece it together. These weren't just secret indulgences, they were symbols, tokens, gifts, exchanged under cover of piety. A carved clasp here, a perfume vial there. You even find a pair of silk garters once, stashed behind the altar rail. You pretend not to see, but your heart pounds all the same. Sister Lucia laughs when you tell her. "I knew it," she says, poking your ribs. "I always said Beatrice looked too smug for someone eating turnips every day." You both giggle, but you also understand that beneath the joke lies something sharper. The line between rebellion and survival is thin, and these luxuries, they're not just vanity, they're armor, a way to feel human in a place that demands you become a ghost. Then comes the day the bishop visits. He walks through the convent like he owns it, nose lifted, ring extended for kissing. The prioress shows him the chapel, the dormitories, the library. He pretends not to notice the shine on Sister Clare's rosary beads or the silk trim on the altar cloth. But later that evening, during a private supper, the prioress makes an announcement. All personal items not provided by the convent must be surrendered for inspection. Panic flickers like lightning through the room. No one speaks, but the scraping of spoons slows. Eyes dart. You feel the shift. That night, you watch as sisters sneak through the halls in near silence, hiding things behind loose stones, inside mattress seams, between pages of ancient psalters, a silver hairpin behind a crucifix, a painted mirror beneath the floorboards. You help Lucia hide her brooch, the one shaped like a lily, a gift from her sister before she entered. "They won't take it," she mutters. "I won't let them." You tuck it inside the foot of an unused candle holder and pray no one thinks to look there. The inspection happens the next day. The bishop and his aides go from cell to cell, prodding, sniffing, peering. They find a few contraband items, nothing scandalous, mostly rings, handkerchiefs, bits of silk. No punishments are announced, but the message is clear. You are watched. Still, some sisters continue. Quietly, carefully. You learn from them. You stitch secret initials into your bed sheets. You dab vinegar on your pulse points to mimic perfume. You carve a small flower into your nothing bold, but something that's yours. And sometimes, in the cloister's stillness, you think about what all of this really means. That even here, in a world built on denial, identity survives. It whispers through silk linings. It glints in hidden jewelry. It breathes through forbidden threads. You are not pure marble. You are flesh. You are memory. You are longing. And they can't wash that away, no matter how many rules they write. The first thing you notice about the new convent isn't the bells or the gardens or the chapel, it's the laughter. Real, unguarded laughter, drifting down the corridor like incense. The kind of sound you've almost forgotten how to feel in your chest. You've arrived here under the guise of a temporary reassignment after the bishop's visit to your previous convent stirred more questions than answers. You didn't ask to be moved, but no one asked Sister Benedicta either. The place is called Santa Maria del Ombra, a beautiful name, really Our Lady of Shadow. You think about that often as you settle in, because there's something in the air here, something just beyond sight, like perfume you can't trace or a secret half whispered in another room. At first glance, everything appears normal. The habits are the same, the schedule strict, prayer at dawn, chores by midday, silence at meals. But soon you start to notice the differences. For one thing, the sisters here speak with an unusual confidence. They don't just obey, they negotiate. The abbess, a woman named Mother Aurelia, carries herself not with humility but with elegance. She wears rings. For heaven's sake. 3 of them. One of them looks suspiciously like a wedding band. Then there are the visitors. You first spot them during your 3rd week. 2 men entering the convent's side gate at dusk, laughing with the gatekeeper, slipping inside without ceremony. You blink. You must be wrong. Men aren't allowed inside a cloistered convent, but there they are. And later that night you hear music, faint but unmistakable. A flute, a low drumbeat, a woman singing. The next day, the convent feels unchanged, but you feel changed. Something about hearing music in a place where silence is sacred rewires your sense of what's possible. Historians still argue whether Santa Maria dell'Ombra was truly corrupt or simply liberal in interpretation. Some called it a house of reform-minded nuns. Others, including a Vatican inquiry from 1349, described it as ungovernable. The surviving records are vague burned letters, intercepted missives, fragments of ledgers with questionable entries like wine, for medicinal use, 7 barrels. What they suggest is a place not of chaos, but of calculated freedom. You begin to explore. The garden here is more wild, more like a pleasure grove than a herbery. Statues of saints are tucked among roses and ivy, their expressions almost amused. There's an unused fountain, shaped like a swan, and behind the main chapel, you discover a small chamber lined with velvet cushions and a faint scent of sandalwood. Sister Elena calls it the music room, though no one plays during daylight. One evening, Sister Elena invites you there. You hesitate, but curiosity wins. Inside are 3 other sisters, seated in a semicircle, sipping something dark from delicate glasses. You freeze in the doorway. They laugh. "Don't look so shocked," one says. "It's just wine. Our Lord drank it." You stay. You drink. It's sweet, with a bite. It burns down your throat like guilt, then settles like courage. Sister Elena begins to sing softly, beautifully, a secular tune with words about rivers and longing. You close your eyes and let the sound wrap around you. This isn't what a convent is supposed to be. But then again, who decided that? In the weeks that follow, you see more. A hidden alcove with a mirror and cosmetics. A small chamber where silk dresses hang beneath layers of linen veils. Notes tucked between prayer books, love letters maybe, or poetry. It becomes clear. Santa Maria dell'Ombra is more than a convent. It's a performance, a sanctuary, a masquerade, or all of them at once. You keep your silence. You participate, a little. You share glances in the corridor. You learn the double meanings of certain psalms. You take to walking the halls barefoot at night, just to feel the cold stone and remind yourself you're still real. One night, the revelry spills out of the chapel. You're awoken by giggling, not bells. You rise, wrap your cloak around you, and slip into the corridor. The doors to the chapel are ajar. Inside, there are candles, hundreds of them, and bodies, dancing, swaying, not in mockery of God, but perhaps in defiance of the idea that devotion must be grim. At the center is Mother Aurelia, arms raised, eyes closed. She's not leading a prayer, she's leading something older, wilder, and yet not unholy. No one stops you when you enter. A glass is pressed into your hand. You don't drink this time, but you don't leave either. The next morning, the convent is quiet again, impossibly still. You attend prayers, you recite your Latin, you mend linens. But the candle wax on the floor of the chapel tells the truth. So does the missing wine. So does the memory. You lie awake that night wondering how many convents were like this. Places of contradiction, of performance, of rebellion laced in ritual, of sanctity wrapped in scandal. And you begin to suspect that God, if he's watching, might not be angry. He might be amused. It starts with a sound, not the tolling of the matins bell, not the drone of morning psalms, but something smaller, wet, muffled. You're walking through the corridor between the kitchens and the old infirmarione you've never used before when you hear it. A whimper, then a sharper cry, cut off fast. You freeze. It's coming from behind the door to the cellar stairs. You press your ear to the wood. Silence now, except for the faint creak of floorboards. You could turn back. You should, but your fingers find the latch. The air inside is thick, dusty. It smells like mildew and old candle wax. You descend slowly, your heart loud enough to drown out your thoughts. There are crates stacked against the walls, a line of pickled vegetables, sacks of flour, and in the far corner, a patch of darkness that doesn't look right. You step closer. Then you see it. A blanket, mottled red, something curled beneath it. A baby. You gasp too loud, and in the same breath, a figure rises from the shadows. It's Sister Beatrice, her face pale, lips trembling. She holds one finger to her lips. Shh. The infant doesn't cry again. Just a soft breath, then silence. You back away slowly, and Beatrice doesn't follow. She just kneels again, cradling the bundle in shaking arms. You don't sleep that night. You think of Sister Benedicta, of hollowed alcoves and missing names, of cries swallowed by thick walls and guilt buried under hymns. You think about how a baby, in a place like this, can be both miracle and evidence. The next day, Beatrice is gone. No announcement, no farewell. Just an empty place at table, and her name struck from the rota. You keep your silence, but you know you're not the only one. Lucia looks at you differently that night. She doesn't ask. She just takes your hand beneath the blankets and squeezes it. Historians still argue whether cases like these were outliers or the unspoken undercurrent of monastic life. The Church's own records are filled with euphemisms. Transferred to stricter care, taken ill, sent to a place of retreat, but rare legal documents and letters, often uncovered centuries later, hint at darker truths of infants buried in cloisters, of midwives summoned in the dead of night, of quiet disappearances, orchestrated with terrifying efficiency. And there's no mistaking the fear it all creates. From then on, the sisters move differently. Conversations are clipped, laughter fades. Even the secret indulgences, the silk, the perfume, the late-night wine seem dulled, like colour bled from fabric. The Mother Superior tightens the schedule. No more solitary chores, no unsupervised walks in the orchard. The chapel is locked between services. But fear, like desire, doesn't just go away. It tunnels inward. You begin to see the cracks again, not in the walls, but in the people. Sister Elena starts praying too loudly. Sister Honoria begins pulling her hair out, strand by strand, while claiming she's only weaving penance. Lucia grows quiet, slipping away for longer stretches, eyes distant even when she's near. Then one afternoon, as you're returning a basket of linens to the vestry, you overhear a conversation you were never meant to hear. Two visitors, male, authority in their tone. They're speaking to the abbess. "Another?" one says. "We warned you, Mother Aurelia." The abbess doesn't flinch. It was handled. The curia is watching closely. You know what that means. There's a pause. Then, "We'll need the records. All of them." That night, you check the cellars. The blanket is gone. So is the bundle. So is every trace. Lucia doesn't come to the dormitory. You wait. Morning prayers pass. Still no sign. You ask Sister Elenache hasn't seen her. You ask the gatekeeper. Nothing. By midday, you go to her cell. It's clean. Tidy. Too tidy. Her things have been removed, and her cot is freshly made. You feel hollow. No one mentions her name. You sit in the chapel that evening long after Compline, until the candles burn down to stubs. You press your hands together and pray not to be forgiven, not for clarity. You pray that wherever she is, she remembers your hand. In the weeks that follow, life settles back into its tight rhythm. The laughter returns in cautious trickles. The music room reopens. The wine reappears in smaller bottles. But something inside you has shifted. The convent's walls feel closer now. Not protective, but suffocating. The silence no longer holds comfort, only secrets. You wonder how many girls came before you, how many disappeared, how many buried pieces of themselves in the cellar, the orchard, the hollowed panels of their cells. One day, while gathering herbs, you find a ribbon knotted tightly around a sprig of thyme. It's not yours. You keep it anyway. You tuck it into your sleeve. You don't cry. Not here. Not anymore. Rain lashes the leaded windows, drumming steady and unrelenting, as you scrub the flagstones of the chapter house floor. Your knees ache, your fingers raw, but it's not the cold that makes you shiver, it's the whispers. Again. This time they're louder, more persistent. "Witch," someone muttered last night as you passed. Not cruel, just curious, as if testing the weight of the word on their tongue. The term floats easily in places like this. And lately, it's been attaching itself to more than just superstition. You think of Sister Elena, mixing herbs and whispering prayers that aren't in the Psalter. You think of the moon phases marked carefully in the margins of the old missal someone left behind in the vestry. And you remember Lucia how she used to murmur names into river water and let flower petals drift downstream. Witchcraft, in this house of God. Historians still argue whether medieval accusations of witchcraft among nuns were acts of spiritual paranoia or mechanisms of political control. Some see them as outbursts of repressed sexuality and fear. Others point to documented cases, like the 15th century French nun, Jeanne de Brigue, accused of conjuring spirits in her cell. The church feared her influence, but it feared the idea of unsanctioned female power even more. And that's what you're sensing now, power. Not malevolent, but unruly. One evening, after the storm breaks, Sister Honoria comes to you with a question. Do you know the old names? You blink. She doesn't explain, just repeats the question more slowly, as if you should know, the names the church erased. Later that night, she presses a folded cloth into your hands. Inside is a dried sprig of vervain, a sliver of moonstone, and a parchment scrawled with Latin that isn't quite Latin. You hide it beneath your mattress and don't look at it again for days, but it hums softly in your dreams. You begin to notice the patterns. Sister Marjorie stirs her tea clockwise with 3 turns. Always 3. Sister Beatrice, before she vanished, chose to chant psalms backward when walking alone in the orchard. The garden itself is suspiciously organized. Herbs in rows by planetary alignment. Lavender under Venus. Thyme under Mars. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe not. And then there's the well. The one at the far edge of the cloister grounds, half covered in ivy, rarely used for anything but washing blood from bandages. One dusk, you see Sister Elena there, dropping small bundles into its depths. Leaves, hair, wax figurines. She looks up. She sees you. She smiles. Protection, she says softly. For the girls. You don't ask what kind of protection. Or from what. The line between piety and heresy was always a thin one. Women who healed with herbs were respected until they weren't. Sisters who prayed with passion were praised until their visions strayed too far from doctrine. And you begin to suspect that these walls have contained far more than repentance and silence. They've contained resistance. Magic, maybe. Or something like it. One stormy night, the prioress calls a meeting. All sisters must attend. You gather in the chapter house, cloaks damp, candles flickering. The abbess reads aloud a letter. It's from the archbishop. There are rumours, he says. Unorthodox practices. Signs of corruption. The bishop's men will be visiting. Again. Afterward, silence. No questions. Just the scrape of chairs. Back in your cell, your breath feels thin. You light a candle, then another, then a third. You think of the Trinity, of Lucia's soft voice counting stars, of Elena's smile at the well. You don't know if what's happening here is truly witchcraft, or if it's just women remembering how to shape the world around them when no one else will. But in that moment, you understand something more important. This isn't about spells. It's about survival. The next morning, Sister Honoria disappears. Again, no mention. Just her empty cot, her cup missing from the refectory shelf, her name wiped clean from the schedule. Fear sets in, but so does resolve. The sisters begin to move differently, less overtly. The herbs are tucked deeper in sleeves. The whispered prayers are shorter, but they still happen. And late at night, in the garden, you gather beneath the yew tree with a handful of others. No candles, no chants, just presence. You link hands. Nothing is said, but something is shared. Not power, not rebellion, kinship. They may accuse you of witchcraft, but what you've found is much older. Sisterhood that cannot be confessed. They arrive just after prime. 4 men on horseback, all clad in ecclesiastical black, bearing the seal of the archbishop like it's a sword. Their boots echo sharply against the stone as they march through the convent gates, flanked by a cart carrying ledgers, trunks, and what looks like a portable altar. One of them, older, hawk-nosed, unreadable, introduces himself simply as Canon Rinaldus. He speaks with clipped words and never makes eye contact with the nuns. He doesn't need to. The weight of Rome walks with him. From the moment they cross the threshold, the air changes. Candles burn lower. Doors creak with more suspicion. The silence between the sisters grows thick and sour. They start with the chapel, of course, examining relics, checking the altar linens for signs of impropriety. Then it's the library. Every psalter opened, every margin checked for unholy scrawls. Even the illuminated letters are scrutinized for what Rinaldus calls sensual excess, naked cherubs, lush vines, a saint with eyes too languid. It would almost be funny if it weren't so frightening. You know what's coming. You see the way the sisters begin straightening their habits, scrubbing their hands until their skin peels. The whispers stop. The glances go flat. The music room is locked. The garden goes untended. The well is boarded up, and worst of all, the abbess plays along. Mother Aureliance regal, unflinching, suddenly becomes demure, obedient. She calls Rinaldus, "Your Grace," even though he isn't. She invites him to the refectory, to observe the sisters during meals. She allows him into private dormitory spaces, claims it's for transparency. She does not protest when he demands a written inventory of every personal item held by the nuns. You realize grimly that she's protecting herself, or trying to, because what comes next is worse. Confession, mandatory, daily, private of course, but never truly. Each sister called in turn. The questions aren't spiritual, they're strategic. Have you ever spoken to another sister in secret? Have you ever witnessed pagan practices? Have you ever been touched? You lie. Everyone lies. You must. But the worst isn't what you say, it's what they already know. Rinaldus is holding something back. He hints at letters, witnesses, external confirmations, he says vaguely. He stares too long at your face, too directly. He calls you by name even before you've introduced yourself. Lucia's name is never mentioned, but her absence is suddenly the most present thing in your world. Historians still argue whether Rome's crackdowns on so-called unholy convents were driven by sincere concern or political paranoia. Some believe these inquiries were about control, not reform a method to suppress uncontainable female agency. The records, when they exist, are sanitized, order restored, vows renewed, corruption removed, but rarely do they say how or who was sacrificed. You begin to wonder what Rinaldus has been promised. A bishopric? A cathedral post? A clean chapter in his own book? And then, the purge begins. Sister Elena is the first. She's summoned, then escorted from the grounds under guard. Transfer, they say again. But this time, the guards are not gentle. Her veil falls to the ground as they pass through the gate. No one picks it up. Sister Beatrice follows. Then, Sister Honoria. Then, 3 more you barely knew by name. Each time, the bells toll as if for a funeral. You wait every hour to hear your name, but it never comes. Why not? You ask yourself again and again. And then, one evening, you find a letter on your cot, folded simply, unsigned. It reads, "They know. Say nothing. Burn this." You do, but it's too late. You already feel the walls moving inward. The next day, Rinaldus makes his rounds again. His eyes sweep the chapel during prayers. He pauses behind you longer than necessary. He does not smile. He doesn't need to. That night, Mother Aurelia calls you into her chambers. She closes the door, offers you wine, doesn't pour any for herself. "I've kept you off their list," she says. You blink. Why? She doesn't answer immediately. She moves to her desk, opens a drawer, pulls out something wrapped in cloth. When she places it before you, your breath catches. It's the ribbon you found weeks ago. Lucia's. "I found it in the orchard," she says quietly, tucked into the bark of the yew. You pick it up. It smells like rosemary. Your hand shakes. "You will remain here," she continues, "but you will watch your steps. Your prayers will be louder. Your hands will stay folded. And if they ask you again, I'll say nothing," you whisper. She nods. The next morning you recite your psalms with hollow precision. You smile when spoken to. You scrub the altar until your knuckles split. You no longer walk alone. And you survive. But survival, in this place, is a kind of mourning. You light candles not just for saints now, but for names no longer spoken aloud. For Lucia, for Elena, for yourself. You've grown quieter now, not just in voice, but in presence. You drift through the convent like smoke, leaving no trace, never drawing a second glance. That's how you survive. You've learned how to be seen without being noticed, how to appear devout without giving anything away. It's a kind of performance, this life a daily theatre of obedience, orchestrated under the watchful eye of Canon Rinaldus and the even colder silence of Rome. And then something strange begins to happen. Promotions. Not the glorious kind, not abbess or bishop's aid, but quieter shifts. Sister Beatrice's old position in the scriptorium is offered to you. You accept it with a bowed head and a dry mouth. You spend your mornings copying sacred texts in silence, your fingers smudged with ink and your eyes aching from the flicker of candlelight. But it's better than scrubbing floors, better than the cellar, and the days pass, and you stay. Others do not. One by one, the sisters who remained close to those who disappeared are shuffled out. Transfer, they whisper. You stop counting after 9. Mother Aurelia says nothing anymore. Her face has folded in on itself tighter veils, paler cheeks, words trimmed of any softness. Her eyes are the last to betray her. They plead, they rage, but they never speak aloud. One morning during prayers, you feel her eyes settle on you. She nods once, just once. You nod back. A pact of silence, of shared survival. Not everyone suffers the same fate. Some, like Sister Juliana, begin to rise. She's promoted to sacristan, then to keeper of the guest register. She starts dressing differently, her veil sharper, her expression polished. Her voice takes on the clipped cadence of the inquiry men. You hear her use words like containment and discipline. She becomes their mouth. She watches you too, like Ronaldus used to. You wonder if it's safer to be noticed now or not at all. And then one evening, after Vespers, something unexpected happens. A novice arrives, a girl of about 13, dressed in a habit too large for her small frame. She stares around with wide eyes, hands trembling. You recognize the look. You wore it once. You're assigned to guide her, show her the prayer schedule, the refectory rules, the locations of things she'll never be allowed to understand. You ask her name. Sister Lucia, she whispers. The room spins. Of course it's not her, not your Lucia. This child is different, scared, unsure, unscarred, but the name burns just the same. It feels like an echo, a resurrection, a dare. You begin to remember everything again. Her laugh, her flower-pressing fingers, the ribbon. You realize you haven't cried in months. That night, in your cell, you light 3 candles. One for the girl before you, one for the girl you were, and one for the girl who vanished. You hide them behind your wash basin. Let them burn to wax and smoke. Historians still argue whether some nuns used quiet rebellion to shield others, whether roles like yours, silent keepers of forbidden memory, were accidental or deliberate. But hidden in footnotes and marginalia are signs, strange blessings written in the wrong places, names erased but still legible beneath the vellum, records altered with care, not malice. You begin to understand your role now. You're not just surviving, you're recording. Every glance, every whispered word, every girl transferred without a trace, you etch them into memory. You memorize their faces. You learn their handwriting. You save their scraps of poetry tucked between psalms. You press their tokens, ribbons, beads, leaves into pages and hide them in books where no man would think to look. Because someone must remember. Because history will forget. Unless you don't let it. Then one day, a letter arrives, sealed with red wax, marked for the abbess's hand. You're tasked to deliver it, but when you arrive at her chambers, the door is ajar. She's gone. Her room is empty, her veil draped across the back of her chair. No note, no message. Just an open window, and the wind tugging at the curtains. You hold the letter a long time. Then you open it. Inside, just one line, written in her hand. Do not become what they let you live to be. You burn the letter, but not the words. You carry them inside you, inked along the lining of your thoughts. You keep teaching the novice, not just about Latin and liturgy, but about how to listen, how to watch, how to remember. You tell her to never forget that even the cleanest walls cast shadows. She asks why. You say, because truth hides in silence. The garden is overgrown now. No one tends the roses anymore. The thyme has climbed past its borders. The lavender has gone to seed. But you still walk the crooked paths each dusk, your hands brushing the weeds as if they're old friends, which in a way they are. Beneath the soft rustle of branches, the convent breathes its secrets, and you walk between them like a ghost who never left. Santa Maria dell'Ombra isn't what it was. Not really. The inquiry left something behind, something colder. The laughter is rarer, and the songs in the music room stopped long ago. Rinaldus left, eventually, though no one cheered. He left behind an invisible ledger, one you feel ticking each time someone speaks too softly, or lingers too long with another sister, or dares to smile without lowering their eyes. But still, the convent endures. It always does, and so do you. The novice named Lucia, little Lucia now, walks beside you in the garden sometimes. She's grown bolder, though still careful. Her prayers are genuine, Her questions aren't, "You like her for that." She asks things like, "Why is the well boarded up?" Or, "Why don't we sing anymore?" You never give straight answers, just stories. She once asked why the herbarium has a patch of yew instead of marigolds. You told her, "Because some things root deeper in darkness." Historians still argue whether convents like yours represented institutional failure or quiet resistance, whether the women inside were victims or architects of their own kind of freedom. But you've stopped caring about historians. You know what you saw, what you saved, what you buried. You keep the record still. Not on paper. That's too dangerous now. But in your mind. In the novice's mind. In the way the garden paths still wind like sentences that never end. You've trained your memory like a muscle names. Faces. The scent of perfume that lingered after Sister Elena's last meal. The flick of Lucia's wrist when she smuggled in strawberries from the market boy. You do not write, but you remember. Some sisters were given new posts. Others faded away. The ones who rose too fast, Sister Juliana included, have grown stiff and brittle. Statues of obedience who sometimes flinch when you speak too gently. You suspect they know what they've lost. Every now and then someone visits. A bishop's aide. A curious young priest. They walk the halls, ask veiled questions, glance too long at the dormitory cells. You smile and lead them through rehearsed routes. You show them the sacristy, the reliquary, the locked library. You quote scripture. You speak in polished Latin. They never ask to see the garden. And you never offer, because there are still roots there, beneath the yew, beneath the lavender, beneath the worn earth where the oldest tree leans toward the sun like it's listening. One afternoon you take little Lucia there. She's not little anymore. Her hair is braided neatly, her veil pinned just so. You sit beneath the tree and press something into her hand-a-broken comb, smooth and worn with time. She looks at you, confused. "It was hers," you say. "Who?" she asks. You just smile. Someone who remembered. And that's when you know. She'll be the next keeper. You've kept this place alive not in the way the church counts life, but in the way that matters. You've remembered what they tried to erase. You've preserved the truth in glances and gestures, in silence and in shadow. And now, you're no longer the only one. You rise slowly, joints aching. She follows. The garden rustles. The wind hums. There's peace in knowing your part is nearly done. There's power in knowing the story will continue. Because for every scandal, there was tenderness. For every broken rule, a moment of connection. For every silence, a voice waiting beneath. And none of it is gone. It's just waiting for the right time to bloom again. So now, as the candles dim and the silence of night wraps around you like a warm shawl, you let yourself rest. The walls of Santa Maria dell'Ombra fade into soft stone, the voices into echoes, the shadows into velvet folds of sleep. The stories, yes, the stories still linger, etched not into parchment but into breath, into memory, into the hush that follows a whispered name. You breathe slowly now, deeply, the kind of breath that reaches down into your ribs and reminds you that you're here, still, after everything. The wind stirs outside, brushing the convent walls with fingers of night air, a lullaby in its own language. The yew tree rustles in the garden. Maybe it's remembering too. Let your eyes close, heavy with the weight of a world that never made space for all the truths it contained. Let your mind quiet, even if the questions still flutter. There's room for them tomorrow. Tonight, there is only stillness. In that stillness, you carry with you the names never written, the songs never sung aloud, the love stories folded beneath layers of wool and silence. You hold them close, like a rosary of secrets. And you know, without a doubt, that someone somewhere will remember again, just as you did. Now your breath softens, the rhythm of your heart slows, matching the pulse of distant bells. You're safe, you're unseen, you're part of a long thread now, woven through time, hidden in plain sight. Let the weight fall from your shoulders. Let the quiet take you. Let the garden in your mind bloom one last time tonight, under a sky full of stars. Sleep well.